Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings.
She didn't have to die that night. The crash wasn't the result of a conspiracy. It was something far worse. A chain of bad decisions, unchecked egos, and deafening silence. Miraculously, Princess Diana survived the crash, but only for a short while. The truth got lost beneath a flood of grief, noise, and sensational headlines. Now, the facts are finally clear, and they're hard to face. This isn't a rumor or a theory. This is what really happened. Remember the final minutes of the beloved late Princess Diana. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana, her companion Dodi Fayed, and their driver, Henri Paul, crashed in a Paris tunnel while fleeing paparazzi. Within minutes, Diana's name was back in headlines, but this time as a tragic symbol of global grief. For decades, the story was shrouded in confusion, speculation, and wild conspiracy theories. Was she murdered? Was it the royal family? Was it something darker, more deliberate? But as time passed and facts emerged, one conclusion became unavoidable. The truth was not buried in mystery. It was sitting in plain sight, tangled in human error, institutional failure, and a media culture addicted to chaos. And that's what makes it worse. Because when we strip away the noise, the picture that remains is brutally clear. Diana didn't die because of a sinister plot. She died because the people and systems around her failed, one after another, in a deadly domino effect. From the reckless choice of driver, to the ignored seatbelts, to the medical delay that may have cost her life, everything that could go wrong did. Now, nearly 3 decades later, the pieces have finally come together. Court transcripts, inquests, expert reconstructions, and official investigations from both France and the UK reveal a deeply uncomfortable story, one of negligence, pride, and avoidable tragedy. Let's get to the facts that tell a story that's more human and more horrifying than fiction ever could. Let's walk through what really happened that night, why it unfolded the way it did, and why the truth is so much harder to live with than the myths. The night it happened. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, or at least as quiet as life allowed for Princess Diana in 1997. That night, August 30th,
Dodi and Di were eating dinner at the Ritz Hotel.
She and Dodi Fayed were staying at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, a familiar sanctuary owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed. By then, Diana had been relentlessly followed for years, but the press attention had reached a fever pitch. A new romance, a potential engagement, a royal mother dating a billionaire. Every step she took was pursued with long lenses and flashbulbs. That night, the plan was simple: escape the chaos for a few hours of privacy. Just past midnight, Diana and Dodi attempted to sneak out of the Ritz through a rear entrance, hoping to avoid the dozens of photographers swarming the front. Their driver was Henri Paul, the hotel's deputy head of security, and he was tasked with getting them to Dodi's nearby apartment. A second car, a decoy, left the front entrance to throw off the paparazzi. It didn't work. Within minutes, the couple's actual vehicle was spotted, and a pack of paparazzi on motorcycles gave chase through the narrow Parisian streets. The car they were in, a black Mercedes-Benz S280, was not armored or equipped for this kind of escape. Henri Paul was not a professional chauffeur, and more critically, he should never have been behind the wheel. Later toxicology reports would confirm what no one knew that night. He had a blood alcohol content more than 3 times the legal limit in France and had prescription medications in his system. But in the moment, there was no breathalyzer, no second thoughts, just urgency, stress, and a terrible plan in motion. As the Mercedes sped along the Seine, nearing the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the chase intensified. Witnesses described the car weaving erratically at high speeds, with paparazzi dangerously close behind. Moments later, the Mercedes entered the tunnel and lost control. The car veered left, clipped a white Fiat Uno that has never been definitively traced, then slammed into the 13th concrete pillar of the tunnel. The impact was devastating. The vehicle crumpled like foil, spun, and came to rest, a mangled wreck. Inside, Dodi Fayed and Henry Paul were killed instantly. Diana, seated in the back, was still alive. Within minutes, emergency personnel arrived at the scene. A few paparazzi had actually reached the wreck before paramedics and began taking photographs of the twisted wreckage, and of Diana herself, injured and dying. Some of those photographers would later be arrested and charged with invasion of privacy, though the charges were eventually dropped. What matters more is what happened next. Diana was still conscious when paramedics reached her. She was pinned in the back seat and suffering from multiple internal injuries, though she was coherent enough to speak briefly. French emergency protocol dictated that patients receive treatment on site before being moved, so Diana was stabilized at the scene for more than half an hour. During this time, she went into cardiac arrest. Paramedics revived her and began transporting her slowly and carefully to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. The journey took more than 40 minutes. She arrived in critical condition. In surgery, doctors discovered she had suffered a torn pulmonary vein, a rare but often fatal injury. Despite every effort, they couldn't save her.
Anna, Princess of Wales, has died. She died at 4 a.m. after going into cardiac arrest.
Princess Diana was pronounced dead at around 4 in the morning. The news spread across the globe within hours. There was only one survivor of the crash, Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard, who was seated in the front passenger seat. He suffered massive facial injuries and had no memory of the crash, but he was the only person in the vehicle wearing a seatbelt. That fact raised immediate and lasting questions. Why weren't Diana and Dodi wearing seatbelts? Why was Henry Paul cleared to drive in his condition? How did the paparazzi get so close without police intervention? And perhaps, most haunting of all, if Diana had received different treatment or faster transport, could she have survived? The wreck was not just a moment of impact. It was a slow-motion disaster, one that unfolded over minutes, not seconds. And the truth that cuts deepest is this: Diana didn't die on impact. She was alive, wounded, and waiting for help that came too late. That one simple fact reframes everything we think we know about that night. It wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the result of a long string of human failures that added up to the unthinkable. The human errors that sealed her fate. There was no grand plot, no poison, no shadowy assassin in the night. What killed Princess Diana wasn't a conspiracy. It was a pileup of poor decisions, lapses in judgment, and systemic failures that collided at exactly the wrong moment. That's what makes this story not just tragic, but maddening. Start with the man behind the wheel. Henry Paul was a trusted employee of the Ritz Hotel, well-liked and competent in his duties as deputy head of security. But he was never meant to be a chauffeur, let alone one responsible for transporting high-profile individuals through a high-speed pursuit in one of the most photographed cities in the world. On the night of the crash, Paul had been off duty earlier in the evening and then called back to manage the situation as the press swarmed the hotel. By the time he got behind the wheel of the Mercedes, he was not just unfit, he was intoxicated. His blood alcohol level was more than triple the French legal limit, and toxicology reports revealed a mix of alcohol, antidepressants, and tranquilizers in his system. Yet, for reasons that remain frustratingly unclear, he was allowed to drive. There was no breath test, no second opinion. Those close to the situation either didn't notice or didn't act. Even more shocking, Diana and Dodi's professional driver An experienced chauffeur employed by the Al-Fayed family was available that night, but the decision was made to rely on Henry Paul, likely in a rush to outmaneuver the press. That one call may have set the rest in motion. Then there's the matter of seatbelts. Neither Diana nor Dodi were wearing theirs. It's a bitter irony. Seatbelt awareness was something Diana had publicly supported, especially in her work with children. Yet in the back seat of the Mercedes that night, they went unused. In the aftermath, investigators concluded that Diana might have survived the crash had she been belted in. Her injuries were catastrophic, but not immediately fatal. The only person in the car who wore a seatbelt, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, was the only one to live. Of course, the seatbelts weren't the only protective measure ignored. There were gaping holes in security protocol. For a woman as globally recognizable and as frequently targeted as Diana, there should have been a comprehensive plan in place. There wasn't. Instead, decisions were made on the fly. The decoy car at the front entrance, the last-minute switch of vehicles, the rushed exit from the rear, all of it reeked of improvisation. What they were trying to avoid, the press, ended up tailing them anyway. In trying to escape attention, they drove straight into disaster. And then there's the medical response. The French emergency system follows a stay and stabilize model. Paramedics prioritize treatment on-site before transporting a patient. In Diana's case, this meant precious minutes were spent tending to her inside the wreck, then more minutes stabilizing her in the ambulance, then a slow ride to the hospital through central Paris. British trauma experts later speculated that had she been rushed directly to a trauma center, a scoop-and-run approach, her chances might have improved. The injury that ultimately killed her, a torn pulmonary vein, is incredibly difficult to detect and repair. But time is everything in trauma, and she didn't have enough of it. Add to this the chaos of the scene itself. Paparazzi were not just bystanders. They were an active part of the crisis. Some took photographs instead of offering help. Others reportedly tried to breach the crash site. Their presence delayed first responders, created confusion, and turned a critical rescue scene into a grotesque media circus. Though many were arrested, most charges didn't stick. But the ethical stain remains. So what really killed Princess Diana? A drunk driver, a failure to enforce basic safety measures, a rushed and reckless plan to outpace photographers, an emergency system not built for trauma of this kind, and an entire media industry that had turned her into prey. None of these mistakes were new. None of them were unpredictable. They were just ignored, layered one atop the other until the weight was too much to bear. But uncovering what went wrong on that night was only the beginning. How did two nations grapple with the tragedy? And what did their investigations really reveal? The investigations: Britain versus France. Two systems, two cultures, one truth. In the aftermath of Princess Diana's death, grief quickly gave way to suspicion. The crash was sudden, the details murky, and the global shock so overwhelming that the idea of it being merely an accident felt too simple, too senseless. In response, two nations launched full-scale investigations. One in France, where the crash occurred, and later a much broader one in Britain, driven in part by public outcry and years of unanswered questions. The two systems approached the case differently, but in the end, their conclusions aligned in one grim consensus. Diana's death was preventable, but not planned. The first investigation began immediately in Paris. French authorities treated it as a standard criminal case, focused on the cause of the crash. Over the course of nearly 2 years, investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses, reconstructed the accident in forensic detail, and analyzed vehicle data, toxicology reports, and scene evidence. The French inquiry concluded in 1999 that the crash was caused by Henry Paul's intoxication, combined with excessive speed and the aggressive pursuit by paparazzi. It was, in their view, a tragic accident, with no evidence of foul play. While the behavior of the press was roundly criticized, no criminal charges ultimately stuck, and the investigation was formally closed. But in the UK,
Mohammed Al Fayed was best known for his links to the British royal family. His son Dodi.
The pressure didn't ease. Mohammed Al Fayed, devastated by the loss of his son Dodi, became one of the most vocal skeptics of the official story. He insisted that Diana and Dodi had been murdered, alleging a conspiracy involving the British royal family and secret services. His claims were explosive, and though many were easily debunked, they tapped into a public already uneasy about the gaps in the story. Why wasn't Diana wearing a seatbelt? Why was Henry Paul allowed to drive? Why were there no CCTV images from key parts of the Ritz or the tunnel? The absence of clear answers allowed doubt to fester. To address the growing storm, British authorities launched Operation Paget in 2004, a massive investigation led by Lord Stevens, former head of the Metropolitan Police. Over the course of nearly 3 years, the Paget team reviewed more than 20,000 documents, interviewed 400 witnesses, and traveled extensively to reconstruct events. It was one of the most thorough investigations into a car crash in history. What they found was sobering, not scandalous. Operation Paget fully rejected the idea of an assassination or conspiracy. There was no credible evidence that the British intelligence services had been involved. No tampering with the car, no fabricated pregnancies or secret engagements. The investigation did, however, uncover serious flaws in security, judgment, and response. Henry Paul was confirmed to have been heavily intoxicated. The decision-making by both the hotel and Diana's team was found to be reactive, disorganized, and unsafe. And the role of the paparazzi, while not criminal by French legal standards, was certainly dangerous and destabilizing. The final report, released in 2006, upheld the core conclusion reached in France.
The driver, drunk and speeding away from the chasing paparazzi.
Diana died because her driver was drunk and speeding, and because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The cause of death was classified as an accident, avoidable but not deliberate. Still, this wasn't the end. In 2007, the British courts launched a formal coroner's inquest into the deaths of Diana and Dodi. It was a public airing of everything. Hundreds of hours of testimony, reams of forensic analysis, eyewitness accounts, and expert medical input. It was here that the most definitive legal judgment was handed down. The jury ruled that Diana and Dodi died as a result of unlawful killing, caused by the grossly negligent driving of Henry Paul and the pursuing paparazzi. It was a subtle but important distinction. While no conspiracy was found, the crash was not dismissed as a simple accident either. It was deemed unlawful, and those responsible, though not criminally charged, were called out by name. Henry Paul, of course, was already dead. The photographers who chased the car were beyond the court's reach, but the system itself was put on trial, and it failed. What stands out most from these investigations isn't the presence of mystery. It's the uncomfortable clarity. There was no hidden hand, no grand sabotage, just a parade of poor decisions, cultural complacency, and personal recklessness. The real question was never who plotted Diana's death. It was why no one around her stopped it from happening. The media machine that chased her to death. Not a smoking gun, but a psychological accomplice. The paparazzi didn't crash the car. They didn't steer it into a tunnel or cut the brake lines, but they were there, before, during, and after. And while they may not have committed a crime in the legal sense, their presence was more than incidental. It was the backdrop, the pressure, the silent hand pushing every decision toward disaster. If you're looking for villains in this story, they don't wear black hats. They carry cameras. Diana had lived under the microscope for years. Long before that night in Paris, she had become the most photographed woman in the world. Her smile, her sadness, her vacations, her charity work, her romantic entanglements, every aspect of her life was currency in the tabloid economy. Even her pain became product. Every flashbulb burst wasn't just a photo, it was profit. And with each magazine cover or scandalous headline, the incentive to get closer, dig deeper, and push harder only grew. By 1997, the media obsession with Diana had reached a breaking point. Her relationship with Dodi Fayed had become tabloid gold. The pair had been photographed aboard yachts, in luxury hotels, and walking hand in hand through Europe, and speculation was spiraling.
Princess Diana was dating Egyptian playboy Dodi Al-Fayed. Over the years, it's been called Diana's last great love affair.
Were they engaged? Was she pregnant? Was this the ultimate rebellion against the crown? The public couldn't get enough, neither could the press, and that obsession created the conditions that led to Paris. The decision to leave the Ritz that night wasn't just about privacy, it was about escape. They were trying to outmaneuver the cameras. That meant back entrances, decoy cars, and ultimately a rushed, risky journey through city streets. Henri Paul may have been drunk, but it was the paparazzi chase that turned a bad decision into a fatal one. Eyewitnesses reported motorbikes weaving through traffic, tailing the car aggressively, jockeying for position. It was chaos, and in that chaos, the Mercedes entered the tunnel too fast and didn't come out. What happened next was perhaps even more disturbing. As the wreckage sat crumpled beneath the Alma underpass, several paparazzi continued to take photographs of the twisted metal, of the victims inside, and of Diana, still alive but gravely injured. Some tried to sell the images before the public had even learned she was dead. First responders had to push past photographers to reach the car. While not all of them were taking pictures, some did try to help. Enough were behaving like spectators, not humans. It was a moment that stunned even the most cynical observers. In the days that followed, the global reaction was visceral. Crowds mourned, tributes flooded Kensington Palace, and the press, particularly the British tabloids, faced unprecedented backlash. Public trust cratered. Headlines that once teased Diana's love life now wept for her loss. Newspapers that fed on scandal were suddenly scrambling to show empathy. But the damage was already done, and the hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. The media had followed her to death, then rushed to mourn her like old friends. The question isn't whether the paparazzi were legally to blame. It's whether they helped create the storm she was trying to outrun. Diana herself had warned the world about this years earlier. In interviews, she spoke about the suffocating attention, the photographers who leapt from bushes, chased her car, or yelled degrading questions to provoke a reaction. She said she feared it would end badly. She wasn't wrong. Even before the crash, the press had played a powerful role in shaping her reality. They had elevated her, then cornered her. They chronicled her transformation from shy princess to global icon, but they also hunted her like prey. And when she finally tried to carve out a private life, after her divorce, after her public service, after everything, they followed her into the night. In that sense, the paparazzi didn't just chase the car, they chased the story they had helped create. And when it all fell apart, they were right there to capture the final shot. Beyond the immediate chaos of that night, the media's relentless pursuit was part of a larger, more troubling pattern. For years, Diana had been caught in a whirlwind of public fascination and intrusive reporting. The cameras followed her every move, turning private moments into public spectacle. This constant scrutiny didn't just invade her life, it shaped it. The pressure to maintain a certain image, to respond to the unending glare, took a toll that few fully understood. It created a feedback loop where Diana's every action was amplified, dissected, and commodified, making her both an icon and a target. What's more, the culture of paparazzi didn't exist in a vacuum. It was fueled by consumer demand. Tabloid sales soared on scandal and sensation, and media outlets competed fiercely to capture the perfect shot. In many ways, the tragedy was a reflection of society's obsession with celebrity at any cost. This relentless chase blurred the line between public interest and invasive voyeurism. It exposed the dangerous consequences of prioritizing profit over privacy and fame over safety. Diana's death became a stark warning about what happens when the media machine spins out of control and the human lives it can destroy in the process. So, after the verdicts were in and the headlines faded, what lasting impact did Diana's death have, and what lessons were truly learned? The aftershocks. What changed and what didn't? The world didn't just mourn Princess Diana, it paused. It reeled. The reaction to her death wasn't like the passing of any other public figure. It felt personal, as if something had been taken unfairly, suddenly, and far too soon. People flooded the streets with flowers and candles. There were vigils, tears, and days of silence. In Britain, the monarchy faced one of its greatest crises in decades, and beneath the grief was a single unspoken question: how did this happen? In the years that followed, Diana's death didn't just echo through headlines.
The Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident.
It triggered real changes, some tangible, others cultural, many overdue. One of the most immediate effects was the scrutiny placed on press behavior. Though paparazzi culture didn't vanish overnight, public disgust reached a breaking point. Newspapers were forced to rethink their relationship with privacy and celebrity. Media outlets that once paid top dollar for invasive photos began implementing new editorial policies. Laws in both France and the UK were revisited, especially around privacy and press intrusion. It didn't stop the worst instincts of tabloid culture, but it put them under the spotlight and, for a time, made exploitation feel unacceptable. In the UK, the royal family itself underwent a transformation. For years, the monarchy had remained distant, controlled, insulated from emotion. But after Diana's death, public pressure cracked that veneer. Queen Elizabeth, criticized at the time for her initial silence, eventually addressed the nation directly. The firm, as the royal institution is known, had to adapt. Diana had brought a human face to the crown, and after she was gone, that humanity couldn't be ignored. In the decades since, the royal family has become more publicly engaged, more responsive, more emotionally accessible, partly because it had to be. The lesson was clear. Remaining above the people no longer worked. There were also more practical shifts. Vehicle safety campaigns took on renewed urgency, particularly regarding seatbelt use. Diana's death became a case study, devastating proof that one simple action could be the difference between life and death. Government-backed road safety initiatives leaned into that narrative. In France, emergency medical services came under scrutiny. Though the stay-and-treat model remained standard there, international pressure pushed for updates in how trauma cases are assessed and transported. In the UK, discussions began about how to better handle high-profile security scenarios in public places. Even in fields like journalism and medicine, Diana's death became part of the curriculum. In journalism ethics courses, her story is a touchstone, a turning point in the conversation about press responsibility. She became the poster case for too far and a reminder that chasing the story is never more important than the people involved. In trauma medicine, her injuries and the timeline of her treatment remain subjects of debate and analysis. What could have been done differently? What must never be repeated? Not everything changed. Paparazzi culture didn't disappear. The hunger for scandal, celebrity, and voyeurism still drives clicks, sales, and headlines. In some ways, it's only gotten more sophisticated, digital now, more anonymous, but just as insatiable. Celebrities still get hounded. Private lives are still made public. And despite all the grief, all the outrage, and all the promises of reform, the machine that chased Diana never fully shut down. What did shift was the awareness. Diana's death opened eyes. It forced hard conversations about how we treat public figures, how the media behaves, and what responsibility looks like when the cost of failure is a human life. Her passing wasn't just an event, it was a reckoning. In the end, the aftershocks of her death were felt across governments, newsrooms, emergency services, and even families at home. For a moment, the world stopped to ask itself, how did we let this happen? And underneath that question was a quieter one. What does it say about us? The real mystery was negligence. For years, people wanted a deeper mystery. They searched for shadows behind the headlines, for secret enemies, secret pregnancies, royal plots, staged deaths.
Diana has been killed. Jodie Fayed also died, as did the driver of the car.
They wanted something dramatic enough to match the scale of loss, because the truth, as it turns out, was far too ordinary. Princess Diana didn't die because someone planned it. She died because no one prevented it. Her death wasn't sealed in a boardroom or a palace. It was sealed in a tunnel in Paris, the moment a drunk man was handed the keys. It was sealed when seatbelts were ignored, when the need for privacy outweighed the need for planning, when the press crossed one more line, when institutions failed to say, stop. Negligence is rarely as thrilling as conspiracy. It's harder to write movies about. It doesn't satisfy the need for villains or dramatic closure, but it's far more terrifying because it means anyone could fall into the same gap. It means tragedy doesn't need a mastermind. It just needs people to look the other way. And that's what happened to Diana. Everyone thought someone else was in charge. The hotel thought Henry Paul was sober enough. Diana's security team thought the decoy would buy them more time. The paparazzi thought their photos were harmless. The public thought the media's appetite had limits. The systems, legal, medical, royal, thought they would always have another chance, but they didn't. The final truth is this: Princess Diana didn't have to die that night. The crash didn't kill her instantly. There was time. There were choices. And in that gap between survival and loss was a silence that haunts every retelling. She was let down by the people around her, by the system around her, and by a world that had spent more than a decade consuming her life without ever protecting it. It's a hard truth to face because it asks us to look inward, to acknowledge how society's fascination with fame, speed, and sensation can blind us to basic human dignity and safety. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about accountability, not just for those behind the wheel or the cameras, but for all of us who watch, consume, and sometimes ignore. In the end, the mystery wasn't about who wanted Diana gone. It was about why no one kept her safe. That's the part that should keep us up at night, because we know how this story could have ended, and we all know it should have ended differently. Thanks for watching. See you in our next upload.